All right, my friends, J.R. Dukes with you. Appreciate everybody joining me. It's always a pleasure. Everybody take time, say hello. We just hit the button this time correctly so that we can go live. We have a special guest with us tonight. Let me make sure just one second. Let me make sure I'm on all the channels. Okay, we got YouTube going and we have X. All right, Facebook and Twitch. Fantastic. Appreciate everybody piling in and saying hello. Let me know if you have any issues hearing me. We're going to get right into it. We got a lot to talk about today, a lot going on. And like the title says, I have a special guest for us today. Additionally, we're going to be talking heavily concerning the developing story pertaining to Joe Biden. I know Fox News has been all over this today. A lot of concerns, folks, going on as far as President Joe Biden's health. We have talked about this many times on this particular show, and we're going to drill down on this today. Also, a quick programming note: if you are interested in joining, either calling in or join us via video, feel free to do so. The link is in the chat, in the comments. I want to post it one more time just to make sure everybody's got it. All you got to do is click on that StreamYard link. If you just want to talk by phone, that is also okay. When you hit that link, you'll pop up on my screen and I'll get to you in order. So it's just that easy. Love to have a conversation with each and every one of you. We're going to go ahead and bring on our special guest today. Today we have with us John Galt. John, how you doing today, my friend?
Doing well. How about you?
Appreciate you taking time to join us and our viewers, and I am blessed. I do appreciate you being here. John, if you'd like to take a second, go ahead and introduce yourself to our viewers and let us know who you are, where you're located, and what kind of passions do you have, my friend?
Sure. I'm located in the D.C. area. I'm a landlord here in the D.C. area. Been a landlord for about 30 years, pretty much most of my life. But I've also been a software developer for about 25 years. It's been most of my professional career. So I have a pretty good understanding of economics and technology and kind of how they intersect there.
Fantastic, fantastic. And I know you told me you basically are a full-time landlord in the D.C. area. Is that correct?
Yes, right now, yes.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, I've listened to you before in other programs, and I think you could add a lot to our conversation here today. Let me ask you something, John. What do you think is going on right now with this presidential election, specifically President Donald Trump, the verdict? And I mean, how are people feeling? What are you hearing? What kind of comments do you hear people discussing?
Well, I think the Democrats got what they wanted. They wanted to be able to say he was a convicted felon. So the mission accomplished on that. I'm just not quite sure how that's working with the populace. Yeah, I don't think that's working. I think they're seeing through it. So it'll be interesting to see what else they have up their sleeves. There has to be something, I would imagine.
Well, I think I could echo those sentiments. I've been saying all along, I think that everybody can pretty well see just what a show trial this was. Not a prosecution, but rather a persecution there in New York. Would you say that that's what everybody sees, whether you're Democrat or Republican, whether they admit it or not? Or do you think there's actually people out there that really think Donald Trump had a situation where he was actually convicted of 34 legitimate felonies? I'm just curious as to how you think about that or feel about that.
Well, I think the hatred was so strong for him that for many people, it really doesn't matter. I think for some of the people on the jury, I'm sure, I think there were two attorneys on the jury. And I heard that there's speculation that they may have been under pressure with their license. So I just think that, I've lived in New York for years. I think it would have been very hard for a jury to come back into their neighborhood having acquitted Donald Trump in New York City.
I totally get that. I mean, you're supposed to get a jury of your peers. I mean, that's just the way it's supposed to be in America. We're taught that ever since middle school, high school. That's the way our judicial system works. It's supposed to be blind. It's not supposed to be punitive. It basically is something that is only used at the extreme discretion of a prosecutor, solicitor, or someone that we entrust as a public in that position of authority. And I don't know about you, I bleed red, white, and blue. But at the same time, when I see this type of nonsense, this type of malfeasance going on, I take it personally. And I find it extremely upsetting and troubling that our society has deteriorated into this type of nonsense. I mean, how are we any different at this point than a third world country, one of these banana republics? I mean, this is the kind of thing they do in Russia, Venezuela, Ecuador, a few other countries. I've never seen this in a G7 country. What do you think about that?
Now, I think you're definitely right. You look all around the country and you're seeing third world level corruption as well as third world level crime. And over the last few years, many of our institutions have more or less been destroyed. And I will also say, the trust between people has also been destroyed. And that is kind of the central element of when you're in the third world, is when you don't trust your fellow man. And so that's kind of where we are now, in my opinion.
I think I agree with that. It, in my opinion, has always been the case that if you fall out with people that are in authority, people that I don't want to say is above you, but that illustrates what I'm trying to say. In other words, let's say you have a business, you're a businessman, and the people that are regulating your particular profession or industry, you don't do the right things, say the right things. They really have a lot of discretion and power to simply make your life miserable, if not, frankly, take you out and wipe you away. But I've never seen it where they go after someone so obviously. It's like this huge spotlight is shining on this Trump persecution in all these different formats, and everybody sees it. I mean, we no longer have any type of moral authority to be preaching to Russia or anyone else about how they should conduct their elections. Free and open is what we always say. And I did a video not long ago about a Russian lady that wanted to run for president against President Putin, and she was a decent looking politician. I mean, she was well spoken. She was able to communicate. She spoke English pretty decently. Man, they did the same thing they did to Trump. They simply had her before some type of tribunal, and they said that, oh no, your paperwork's not in order. You don't qualify to run. What do you think about that? Do you think most people get that, or it's just a first time shock? Like, wow.
Yeah, I don't think most people get it. I think there's kind of a malaise. 40, 50 years of very comfort. People have been very comfortable for the last 40, 50 years. And I think that the things that we're seeing, it has been somewhat subtle, and it's kind of hard to imagine where we are. And many people in the States are very familiar with how third world corruption and dictator type situations work. And so this is all new to them.
Right. Now, I want to switch gears just slightly. I'm not one that tries to get into identity politics, but let's face it, it's part of our reality. And unfortunately, the press, especially the liberal, woke talking heads, they just can't get enough of themselves. They just love to talk about this. And obviously, you're a Black American, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, well, I got a question I'm leading to here. I have heard, and I've spoken with many, I would say male Black Americans that are excited for Donald Trump. I'm not saying that he's carrying, a huge majority, let's just say with minorities, specifically Black Americans, but I would say that they're giving him a chance. So my question is, do you think that's the case? And do you think President Trump essentially being persecuted in what is clearly a two-tier justice system, and it's not even so much rich and poor, it's people that's in and out, people part of the deep state, the ruling class, and people that they've decided they don't want as part of that ruling class. Does that make President Trump pull potentially that many more minority voters or not?
I'm conflicted about that. I want to say yes. I really do want to say yes. But on the other hand, I want to say no. I probably lean to no. Look at the Fani Willis election. If the people had seen through what she was doing to Trump, and she's also has the YSL case, which is kind of somewhat similar, farcical. Maybe they would have voted against her. We could have taken that as a kind of a sign that people are seeing through these things. But she was reelected, and so I think that people are pretty, rigidly in one side, in one camp or the other, and a lot of these things, I think they just overlook it, or maybe the media kind of hides it or obfuscates the truth of what's really going on. But
so, go ahead, finish your thought.
Yeah, so I think I've talked to some Black Americans and they are, some of them are still hung up on the propaganda of the last 4 or 5 years. There are some that have been opening up. Ironically, for me, some of the women have found it, the persecution of Trump much more like disturbing than the men. Ironically.
Well, John, I'm going to tell you, I'm actually glad to hear that, and I appreciate your perspective because just straight up, I have heard that more Black Americans, specifically American men, Black American men, have been turning towards Trump, or at least giving him a second look, and not so much with Black females. So that is good news, I think, that he's potentially reaching out to that segment of the population. So if I hear you correctly, you think pretty well no matter what happens as far as Donald Trump's persecution, prosecute, whatever you want to call it, people are pretty well baked in at this point. They've made up their minds. All we need to do is go vote. Is that fair?
Yeah, I probably would say that, but I do think though that the Democrats are losing their grip on the Black Americans. It very well may not matter because they've imported so many migrants in here that it may not matter. But I do think the dependence on the Black vote has been loosened quite a bit, primarily because of the migrant situation.
Well, that's interesting that you point that out because I'm telling you, if President Biden cannot carry the Black vote, Black American voters, if they refuse to vote for him or they just decide, hey, I'm going to stay home, I'm not going to bother because this guy just really does not excite me. If that's the case, then what you're going to see is President Biden losing this next election because if he can't carry the Black vote, he loses. What say you?
Well, I think he'll carry the Black vote. I just think it depends on the extent to how much the Blacks vote for him. What are the percentages? But I definitely think he'll carry.
I misspoke. It's not carry the Black vote. If he cannot carry out his customary overwhelming support of the Black community, and let's say it's 60%, 70%, he loses. And that's kind of what you're saying, you think, or not?
It very well could be possible. It's going to be very interesting to see. I would imagine the Democrats are very concerned about that now. You see, I think Biden has been in Philadelphia a couple of times repeatedly. So there very well could be some concern there, places like Philadelphia and Atlanta.
Briefly, I want to switch. I want to pivot over to Fani Willis out of Fulton County, Georgia. Of course, you're familiar, like our viewers are familiar, with DA Fani Willis, the DA in Fulton County, Georgia, who has brought this ridiculous so-called RICO case. And obviously, Fani Willis loves RICO. I mean, she just loves everything about RICO. She's the definition, in my opinion, of why you don't give prosecutors these type of tools, these so-called RICO, racketeering, internally corrupt organizations, that they were promising us all that they would only use in the most special cases to take out the John Gottis of the world. And of course, now you have who's that rapper, YSL or something like that, on trial right now. Yeah. So you got a rapper on trial now. You have her using this as an instrument to attempt to take Donald Trump out of the election. Is that how you see it? How do you think Black Americans see that?
I've talked to some Black Americans about the YSL case, and I think they're more or less on the side of the YSL. I don't think that really matters as much. I think most of their interest is on her case with Donald Trump. Of the Black Americans that I've talked to, unfortunately and sadly, they really want to see her get Donald Trump, and I think that's why she was reelected.
I'm going to be doing a special video on her opponent. Recently she secured the Democratic nomination for re-election. Of course, that's no surprise, at least not a surprise for me. And I forgot the lady's name, but I have reached out to her to see if I can get an interview with her. I believe she's an attorney. She's a white lady from the Alpharetta area, North Fulton County, which, as you probably do know, is a wealthier area. Roswell, Alpharetta, maybe some of the Buckhead area. It's kind of divided there. And then there's a lot, let's just call it what it is, a lot of white voters in South Fulton County. But again, you do have a lot of Black voters, a lot of Black Democratic voters in Fulton County. Do you think there's any chance this coming November that a Republican candidate could dethrone Fani Willis, kick her out of office, or you think that's a pipe dream?
Nothing's a pipe dream. You know what I thought about as you mentioned this, when they had the last election, and I think the lady's name was Mary Norwood. You may have to look her up. but she ran for mayor. She may have been a Republican mayor, and she was a businesswoman, and she may have been from the Buckhead area, and she lost, I think, to Keisha Bottoms. It'll probably be kind of the same results, probably not even as close as that election.
Unfortunately, I think that I think you're right. I hope that's not the way it turns out. I hope by some miracle there's enough Republican voters turn out to throw her out of office, to be quite blunt about it. But personally, I don't think DA Fani Willis's problems are over. I know one of my friends today sent me a video link or something, and apparently the Court of Appeals there in Georgia, they are now going to hear the case, but it's not going to be until right before the election. So there's no chance that anything is going to move on this case, at least before the election, one way or the other. And at least as far as I'm concerned, that gives me a large sense of joy. And my question is that how you see it too? It's pretty well locked up, or do you have a different take on it?
Yeah, I think it's pretty well locked up. You remember the case with the ladies in the election thing? Not much came of that either. I think.
All right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think they'll kind of sweep it under the rug. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. I want to pivot real quick. Let's just take a look at some of our comments we have coming in here real quick, see if we got any questions. Zach, it's always good to see you in the office, my friend. John, JR, and everyone else, hello. And, of course, we got Rosemarie in the house again. Rose, it's always a pleasure to have you. I always joke about Rose in the program. This is my girlfriend, so she's always tuning in. So I just always give her a shout out right there. And Pennsylvania Paul, as usual, crazy stuff. Yes, sir, it is. Hello, everyone. Zach, PA Paul from Southwest Pennsylvania. Always glad to have you in the house. And hello to Rosemary. Okay, great. Now, we're going to pivot. The news of the day, at least as far as I'm concerned, I think the big story of the day is, as many of you probably know, President Joe Biden is over in France for the D-Day celebrations in Normandy, France, if I can get the word out correctly. As of tomorrow, it's been 80 years since World War II, when the Allies all came together and they invaded France to free Europe. I mean, what a great day. It was quite emotional. I saw some reports on television this morning of some of these men that were actually fighting in this particular war. They're like 99, 100 plus years old. I believe there's only 1% of the men, they were all men at that time, that stormed that beach one way or the other, that are still alive today. And as I said, they have to be 98, 99, 100 plus years old. So all expectations are this is probably the final time we're going to have a celebration in France to commemorate D-Day with an actual living survivor. That's just statistically probably what we're looking at. But what I want to talk about is the news. There's been an article that has came out in the Wall Street Journal today. And this article was trying to be fair, in my opinion, pertaining to President Joe Biden. But they talked to almost 50 individuals, 50 independent people that generally have a close association with President Biden, and they describe him just like the Her report describes Joe Biden, as a person that is in decline. That was their words, not my words. A person that is rapidly deteriorating, and his signs of age are only increasing and expediting at best. And my question for you, John, before we're going to look at a video here, my question for you is just real simple. Do you see it that way? And what do you think other Black Americans see at the same time?
In terms of Joe Biden's health?
Yeah, as far as him being in cognitive decline, do you think other people see it like that way, especially Black Americans or just people in general that you know? And if they see it that way, do you think they care?
I noticed it early on, probably before he was elected. I've talked to people about it, and I think a lot of them brush it off. I think the biggest issue is that the news covers it up. If there was more talk about Trump in the 25th Amendment than there has ever been about Joe Biden. So I think it's just been covered up to most people.
I think unfortunately you're probably right. Most of the legacy news media, they won't even talk about it. They won't even bring it up. They just sweep it under the rug. I think you're absolutely right. I believe the only news stations I see even touching the subject is, of course, Fox News. You have Sky News in Australia, which is kind of like a Fox News for Australia. And then it's either Newsmax or News Nation. I think it's Newsmax. One of them is more liberal, let's just say more like a CNN, and the other one's a little bit more conservative, not exactly completely conservative like Fox News. But you're right. It's the exception and the rule that they're talking about this. But I just for the life of me don't understand why people continue to sweep this under the rug. I'm going to make a series of videos about this because I think this is very important to get out there. And my question is a vote for Joe Biden not a de facto vote for President Kamala Harris? What do you think?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a good question. I think the first vote was a vote for Kamala Harris, considering his age and health. And I think that the people that voted for him the first time had to be okay with her possibly being the president, considering that if he were to be elected the second time, he more than likely would be, would yield to her. So I think she's in better physical condition than him, cognitive condition than him. So maybe an improvement.
That is pretty scary, and you definitely won't find what I'm about to say in any news program that I know of. But do you remember how she got her start back in California? Are you familiar with her by chance, John? I'm just curious if you.
I am.
I see you smuling. Maybe you know what I know. Do you know what I'm? Do you know what I'm about to go into? Back when she first started, dude. She started. I remember years ago. There was a guy named James. I think it was James Brown or James something. I can't remember. He was a city councilman or the mayor. Of San Francisco. The mayor, right? Yeah. Well, there was a vacant spot. Someone died. Something happened on the city council, and he appointed her to that position. And they were, well, you know what they were doing. Yeah. That was his plaything. To be about it. I mean, that's what it was, and that's how she started. I'm not making this up. This is the truth. I remember this, right? And and she's kind of just went up the ladder, so to speak. I'm not going to say how she got there, but I mean, I'm just telling you the facts as I know it. I mean, I'm not trying to be nasty about it. I'm just telling you the way that I remember, the way that I have seen the facts, and I went back and looked at videos pertaining to this, or just news reports talking about her original appointment at the city council, and I believe it was San Francisco.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, good. Well, it's just interesting. I think people should know that. I mean, that's how she started. I'm not saying it's good, bad. I'm just telling you what the reality is. With Kamala Harris, but I just really don't. Oh, Willie Brown, Sapphire. Thanks for bringing that out. You're exactly right, my friend. It was Willie Brown. That's exactly what that was. Yeah, I'm starting to feel like a Walmart greeter. That's hilarious. You're saying hi to everybody. Okay, well, everybody knows everybody. It's good to have everybody. That's right, Willie Brown. That was his name. Thanks, Sapphire. Appreciate bringing that to my attention. And that was a long time ago. So I'm not the only person that remembers this. I mean, I remember way back from the 80s or something along them lines, but I just think it's hilarious. And I think the thing that bothers me about her is that cackle, that constant laugh. I don't know. What kind of feeling do you have about her? You think she'd be any good as a president? God forbid we find out, but I am interested in your take. What do you think?
Well, I think that laugh is kind of a filler for nothing intelligent to say. So when she gets kind of stumped for anything intelligent to say, she just laughs. It comes at the most inappropriate times. Her, in terms of being president, being here in the D.C. area, I'll tell you what, she would be a boon to both sides. That's what I'll say. I think both sides would use her as the useful idiot that they would make her out to be. And so both sides would benefit in that sense.
Yeah, it's funny, but in reality, it's really, really a serious matter. It's just really not funny. We live in a world now where we have wars all over the place. Mm-hmm. We see what happens when you have weak and ineffective, feckless leadership like we have in President Joe Biden. Look at the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal. We could definitely have used, I believe that was like a 30-mile wide military base that the United States built in that particular location, and especially with the trouble and problems we're having in China. and their threats against Taiwan. This base was in their backyard. It was in their backyard, and we gave it away. We literally just shut up shop, gave them all that equipment, and took off. I mean, how stupid do these people think we are?
Yet, very little criticism about that. I've heard more criticism of the Biden administration's withdrawal from Afghanistan from the Uber drivers that are here that will work with the American military in Afghanistan. Those are the only people I've ever heard criticize our withdrawal from there. You very rarely hear anything negative in the media.
Yeah, I agree. I don't hear much about it at all. At the time, we heard a lot about it, and occasionally I'll see someone bring it up. But for the most part, they don't say anything about it. It's like I'll end it, and he ended it. But that doesn't mean it left our nation any better off. It did not leave our friends and allies in a better situation. It's put us in a disadvantage with China, and in my opinion, and you tell me what you think about this, John, when our friends like Australia, New Zealand, just other countries, even India for that matter, when they see us acting in this particular way and manner and not standing with them shoulder to shoulder and basically coordinating some things with them, I worry that that makes these people think, hey, maybe we better do this on our own. Maybe we better reevaluate our relationship with America. Maybe we need to turn to other people to look for leadership. How do you think that affects?
I think as valid as that is, I think the bigger worry is what about what the enemies are seeing? Like this level of weakness serves to really embolden your enemies. When they see this kind of weakness, they see this withdrawal, tucking tail in Afghanistan, things like that. I think that they see this and they really realize that they or may feel that they don't have much opposition in terms of the United States.
I worry about it too. A quick comment here. We have Monique. The black community has a problem with Michelle and Camilla. I agree with that. I don't think that, I think a lot of black Americans feel disenchanted with the Biden administration. I think they feel that a lot of the sentiments that we talked about here today, I think the black community shares it too. And I also tell you one other thing too. I think a lot of the blacks, a lot of the minorities for that matter, but definitely the black community, they feel that they're taken for granted. And you and I talked about this off camera a little bit. We don't have to get too deep into this, but I worry that with Joe Biden doing the things that he does, it only sets up American citizens for failure. Tell me a little how you feel about that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I could talk a lot about the black community, but I'll tell you a story about the white community as well. That I think the migration is really having a hard hit. I used to have a white roofer, and he had a hard time keeping a team. But with the Hispanic migration, with the way that they live, it's a lot easier for them to keep a roofing team. And a lot of times they live under one roof, which gives them the ability to price much better than, say, a white man roofer, as an example, a white American roofer, or just an American roofer, but many white men do roofing. And so I have a guy that does roofing, white guy, white male, and he's having a hell of a time competing against the migrants. And I think the same thing goes up and down the trades, that an American electrician, he may have household costs where the typical American lives mother, father, kids in a home, whereas the Hispanics that are coming to this country live 2 to 3 generations in a home, mother, father, grandmother, children. So there's an in-house babysitter, there's the cooking from home, whereas I think a lot of Americans are going to have to adapt to a population that are coming here that have a different cost basis for living, and that applies to business as well as just your living, in my opinion. Yeah.
Well, I will say this: with the way that prices are going, you have President Biden, for example, on day one, kills the Keystone Pipeline. Obviously, that's resulted in higher gas prices and will continue to result in higher gas prices. Additionally, he's selling off our national, the reserve that we have to artificially keep prices as low as possible because this is an election year. You have, again, inflation essentially unchecked. At least they're not able to control it at this time. And this is what happens when you have a government that just continues to spend money and just think they can spend their way out of any particular problem. So my point is, families may have to get used to living the way you just described. I mean, housing values. Now, I'm a homeowner. I'm glad housing values are up. But then again, it has the effect where other people cannot buy a house. They can't afford to get a house. And you have interest rates so high right now. It just puts it that much. It puts the American dream even further out of the reach of regular working American class individuals. Is that pretty well sum it up for you?
Yeah, the American dream used to be upward mobility, where you wouldn't just get in one house and just root there forever. You would dream about having a bigger house. And I think those things are becoming much, much harder, in that to buy another house, you may be competing with someone who may have 3 or 4 working adults there. And that's very different. It's definitely for renting. And it's going to be very different for Americans to come to grips with it when they're looking for a place to rent and they can't understand why it's so expensive. It's because that place may be occupied by many more people than they would ever think of occupying it by.
I got you. All right. I want to pivot at this point. Let's take a quick look at this video, give our voices a rest, and then I want to talk about this video from today on Fox News, and we'll talk about it here in just one second. If you have anything you want to say in the meantime, let me know, and I can stop the video, but let's run it. It's a few minutes long here. Here we go.
And now, all right, let's get you to the second hour here. President Biden on the world stage, arriving in Europe to mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day, as Washington insiders raise new concerns about the 81-year-old president, revealing the clear signs of his cognitive decline that become more obvious during private meetings. Welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Dana Farina.
Morning, partner. I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning. The White House quickly firing back at this report in the Wall Street Journal, calling the claims false and politically motivated. That long story, however, and it is long, it includes interviews with dozens of high-ranking officials and lawmakers on both sides of the aisle who all agree that behind closed doors, Biden shows signs of slipping.
Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is going to join us in a moment. But first, White House correspondent Peter Doocy is traveling with the president. He's just landed in Paris, or maybe you were there the night before. Peter, good to have you on.
Good to be here. Bonjour. And despite that Wall Street Journal item that they say sources information from 45 different people detailing what these folks are saying is basically questions about President Biden's acuity, here in Paris today, President Biden is not doing anything, even though we were told on the Air Force One trip over here that this trip was going to be action-packed.
It's going to be action-packed, I think extremely moving and extremely important 3 days in France.
When I think of President Biden, I'm not exactly thinking of action-packed anything, but I digress.
With business, with speeches, and with an opportunity for him to say thank you directly to the veterans who saved democracy, saved the free world, and set the stage for the decades of peace and prosperity that followed.
That Wall Street Journal item the White House is taking issue with includes a story from Speaker Mike Johnson, who recalls a recent meeting with Biden about canceling liquid natural gas permits for Europe for climate reasons. Here's the quote. "Mr. President, you are helping Vladimir Putin," Johnson told the president, according to one of the people briefed on the exchange. Biden said that wasn't true and that the new policy was only a study, according to several people familiar with Johnson's version of what happened. Johnson was dismayed that Biden appeared to have forgotten details of his own policies, they said. Tomorrow and Friday, President Biden is expected to travel from here in Paris to Normandy, a few hours away, for these commemorations of what is expected to be the last milestone D-Day anniversary that has some of the 150 D-Day veterans who are still alive present for the ceremonies. We do expect in Normandy, or at least in the Normandy area, President Biden is also going to meet with Vladimir Zelensky. And so expect to hear this president talk a little bit about how he thinks things in Europe right now, maybe not that different than they were 80 years ago. Dana?
An important trip. We're glad you're there for us. Thank you.
My
And
first
for
thought. I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead, John. Go ahead.
Did they shorten the stairs for him coming out of the airplane? I think I read that.
I've read something like that too. And what they were talking about, I think they may talk about it in this clip actually a little bit more, is something to do with the fact that they made a special exit for him or take him out a special way so that he can avoid the press and they don't have to see him trying to walk on and off the plane. It just surprises, and John, tell me if you agree with this. It surprises me that people see this day in and day out, or maybe they don't, maybe they're not paying attention. But when you see this man walking up and down the stairs and he's so elderly, I just don't understand how people don't understand this and react accordingly. Raise their concerns. Well, what do you think about it?
It's definitely mind blowing. It's kind of like propaganda at the highest form.
Okay, let's continue with this. It's just about done. I got a few questions.
Distributor. So you heard a little bit about that Wall Street Journal piece. I just want to read one more piece to you from that. This is Biden deferred so frequently to other lawmakers that much of the conversation didn't include him. Some people who attended the meeting recalled. When questions came directly to him, he would turn to staffers, they said. You couldn't be there and not feel uncomfortable, said one person who attended. I'll just say that. You've been in a lot of meetings with presidents.
Can you imagine being in a meeting with the president and everybody there doesn't want to say the obvious? It's kind of like what they call the pink elephant in the room. You're there. I mean, I can picture this in my mind's eye. You're there talking to the president. He cannot remember meetings you've had with them recently or policies that they've all been talking about, and no one wants to say anything about it. It's kind of like there's a pink elephant in the room and no one wants to mention it.
You really have to question the competency level of the people willing to work for him.
Well, when you see this type of thing happen, I think at a minimum you run the risk of someone invoking the 25th Amendment. I mean, just call it what it is. It's okay to be old. It's okay to even be sick. But when you lose your mind, I don't care what age you are. I don't care if you're 30. I don't care if you're 100. If your mind is not there and you can't remember just general policies that you have, it makes you wonder, don't it?
Yeah, it's kind of like when you were a kid and your grandmother would go to sleep and you slip out at night. I think that's what the people around him are doing. They're slipping out when he goes to bed at night.
All right, let's listen a second here.
In your time in government, your reaction to this story that is really pretty explosive this morning.
Now, for our viewers that don't know, this is former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. He's lost a lot of weight. Maybe he got on that Ozempic plan or whatever. But anyway, if you don't recognize him, that's who this is.
Well, Dana, I say this with no joy. These aren't just private conversations where we can see that President Biden is no longer up to the task of being the commander in chief and keeping America secure. But we see it in the public speaking that he does as well. He can't follow a teleprompter, like basic skill sets that every leader of the free world needs to have. We can see it in how he interacts with people. He has these moments that just look like he's just getting older and that his faculties are not all with him. I'm counting on our commander in chief to have the skill set, the mental acuity to actually deliver for America. And I think we can all see with our own eyes. We don't have to rely on the Wall Street Journal or anybody else to see that there is this real risk. And Dana, I'll close with this thought. I've been traveling a bunch these last few weeks all over the world. Leaders across the world can see this as well. They can see that when they interact with President Biden, that he is not able to follow the through line of the conversation entirely. That's not good when you're thinking about the fact that we have two wars today, a Chinese Communist Party that is moving out. This is an enormous risk to the United States of America.
It's interesting you say it that way because you have to think that our European allies, if they don't already see it, they're going to see it on this trip.
It is the fact that we just continuously see every time. It seems like almost every time we turn on the TV and we see something to do with Joe Biden, he's just walking like a real frail old man, just kind of barely making it, just kind of steady as you go. Just like you said, it's just like an older grandmother or grandfather having some type of issue. I really don't understand why everybody is not shouting about this. I guess I do, only in the sense that they don't want Donald Trump to run. So they're going to go ahead and we're going to have a campaign that if it was a movie, it would be something like Weekend at Bernie's. You basically have a dead president. Have you seen that movie, Weekend at Bernie's? You know what I'm
Yeah,
talking
I've heard a lot about it. I haven't seen it.
yeah, the guy died or something like this on vacation as vacation home, and they don't want the vacation to end, so they just basically towed him around like he's still alive. And that's kind of like what's going on. Is like this election where you have a candidate that's not really home anymore. You know, it's the Bernie election. I think I may start going with that.
I like that.
I think I like it too. Yeah. I think I like it too. Briefly, I want to switch gears. I want to talk about something. I found this little cutout online somewhere. This pertains to the border. As we know, our borders are in a mess. And as of today, President Joe Biden, miracle of miracles, folks, he found a way to have the authority to do what he needs to do to secure the border. But I want to make sure everybody's aware of a few things you may not have picked up on, all right? When it comes to this border bill, so-called border bill, a few of these points here, it enshrines catch and release in a federal law, which basically gives the president under law the ability, because of his executive order, to put under federal scrutiny this catch and release, and it solidifies it in the law. It allows at least 5,000 illegal entries per day, over 1.8 million a year. If you don't know already, estimates have it that there is 5.5 million illegal crossings, individuals that's crossed over into our country since President Joe Biden's been in office. New authority for Biden to grant asylum to an unlimited number of immigrants, path to making Biden's migrants into voting citizens, grants millions of work permits for Biden's illegal stealing jobs and wages from American workers, provides taxpayer funds to fly and house illegals, replaces immigration judges with asylum seekers to rubber stamp fake asylum cases, and finally provides taxpayer funded, just resources for them to get housing or vouchers or whatever it is they choose to get. What do you think about that, John? I'm just curious your take on that.
Oh man, it's really amazing. I've gone to buy the Roosevelt Hotel in New York City, the shelters in DC. It's really amazing to see what's happening here, that regular Americans are being displaced in some cases. Our hotels are turning into migrant centers where they can make more money than being a hotel. It's really sad, for the Americans that have to deal with this. The increase in housing largely is due to all these migrants coming here. Many of them men. They're going to want housing, and they're going to push the price of housing up everywhere they are. Really sad. It's just really amazing. Really amazing.
I agree completely. I'll tell you what's really amazing is it just amazes me how before, even today, Joe Biden was talking about it. They has to take this action because Donald Trump told the Republicans in the House of Representatives not to pass that immigration nonsense they tried to pass months ago. What they forget to tell you is that so-called immigration bill was a terrible, terrible bill. It allowed something like 5,000 plus illegals to come in each day. And only then, it was either each day or each week, but the bottom line is this, and only then could the president consider putting a cap on the number of people coming across the border. And what people don't know about that bill, this so-called fantastic bill, it wouldn't even take effect for 3 to 6 months. I don't hear anybody in the press reporting that. All it would essentially do is put in federal law even more crossings than they have now. At least in my opinion, that's what it does. And this so-called executive action that he has miraculously found a way to do, all this is going to do is make the cartels wealthier, because in part now, since they know a certain amount of people can be stacked up and waiting, they can sell effectively slots in line, if you will, to the highest bidder that wants to pay these smugglers to have them in line to come into the United States. Insanity. What say you?
Yeah, 1.8 million people, what do they call it? Chain migration or something like that. The 1.8 million people come, then they bring their family members here. And a lot of times those people end up getting benefits, public school, things like that. You're talking about a breakdown on an order you just can't even consider. 1.5 million people, which is what he's talking about bringing in. That's Manhattan. That's the size of a small state, a large city in the United States. I don't even know why we need any more people, to be quite honest with you.
Well, I will, as I land the plane here, I will tell you one thing that everybody needs to understand. I've mentioned it before. I believe that they need to stop this nonsense at the border because we need to know who's coming across the border. I saw on television, I think it was there yesterday, they were showing people from China, people from the Far East, the Middle East. You have people that, I believe, Jordan. You have individuals coming across the border. We don't know who these people are. They could be foreign agents. They can be terrorists, whatever. I think immigration is actually important, but we need to have an orderly immigration plan. And again, this is going to be the shocker right here. The immigration that we're seeing right now is actually good. And trust me, don't turn the channel. I got a point to make. Right now, the world is in an extreme population decline. You have countries like Russia, China, Japan. They have so many people that they're losing daily. For example, in China, one of the things that makes an invasion of Taiwan even more likely now is because thanks to China's one baby policy, obviously they forgot to count on one thing, and that was technology to improve the ability to feed their people. They're going to go from 3-4 billion people to less than what the United States has right now by the year 2050, 2060. Unbelievable. They will not have the armed forces necessary to take Taiwan by that time frame. So that is something that is seriously on the mind of the leaders in China. Additionally, the women that are in China now as a result of this crazy one-child policy, obviously back then everybody wanted a boy because they want the family name to be passed down. But the women that are available in China, they don't want children because they have their careers. They're a more wealthy, prosperous country now. They don't have to rely on a family or a husband or whatever. It's just really a mess that they're in. Japan is in a similar situation, not because of a one-child policy, just because they're not having kids. We have the same problem here in the United States. People that look like me, just normal Americans, especially white Americans, they're just not having kids. They're just not having kids. A lot of people, when they come to America after a generation or so, they become wealthier, they become more prosperous. And statistically, the more educated a woman is, the more prosperous individuals are as a whole, the less children they have. But thankfully, the United States is not going to have that problem because of immigration. And one last point about Russia. Russia is in such dire straits for population. That's one of the reasons Putin invaded Ukraine. Did you notice on TV, you hear about their children being taken and brought into Russia? There's a reason for that. It's not because he loves children. He's trying to increase his population any way he can. Russia is such a big country. It requires 1.1 million to 1.2 million soldiers just to repel its borders, just to secure the homeland. They are concerned in the near future, the next 30 to 50 years, they may not have the soldiers necessary to protect their homeland. And again, America is not going to have that problem thanks to our immigration policies coming in. But again, it has to be controlled immigration. And I apologize if I come across something like a woke liberal. That was not my intention. But on this program, I tell you the good, bad, the ugly. I don't care if you're Republican, Democrat, or whatever. I just tell you the way I see it, and I let it fall where it may. What do you think about that?
I think there is some value to cohesiveness. You know, if you're poor, you much rather be around people that you know than people that you don't know. And I think that bringing all these different groups of people in here is bound to be trouble. I think I told you, I go by the DC migrant shelters, and many of the blacks and the whites that were once there, primarily blacks, have been displaced. And I'm sure that causes a lot of anger. So I can't necessarily see how that's good for the United States, even if it allows us to have a higher birth rate, because of the disunity and the lack of cohesion. But I'm willing to consider your argument, though.
Well, that is interesting you brought that up. Do you think effectively, I guess you're talking about assimilation. Do you think assimilation is a problem, whether it's Hispanic or black or white or whatever? Do you see that problem? Because personally, I've only seen that like with, frankly, Muslim individuals coming over here. They generally have more of a difficult time assimilating into our society, and that is a concern I have about that segment of the population immigrating over here. And Europe has that problem right now. Just go visit Germany. That I believe it was Merkel. She allowed in 1 or 2 million East Asian Muslim individuals immigrants into her country, and they have some serious problems right now. It's just like you said, there's not that assimilation. They're not turning into one cohesive country. What do you think? You think that's all people?
Yeah, well, I think in America, if you want to cut hair, for instance, something very simplistic is being a barber. There are licenses and certifications. Well, you go in front of the migrant shelters or in parts of the cities where there are a lot of migrants now, you'll see them cutting hair on the street corners. Same thing with cooking food. New York City's pretty much gotten rid of all regulations as to where and how and who can serve food. And that's very unfair to the people who follow the rules and get the licenses and certifications to serve food. And those type of things you do see a lot. You see the crime, the robberies, things like that the migrants are bringing. And yeah, I don't think the assimilation is there.
I do agree with you about the crime and some of the immigrant crime that's going on. I will say for a fact, I know, for example, in Venezuela, my girlfriend is Venezuelan. She had one of her friends here not long ago visiting, and she's like, hey, we basically have no crime back in Venezuela. When you hear President Trump talk about the insane asylums, their prisoners, whatever, have left Venezuela, that is not BS. That's true. That is exactly what is going on. You have a situation in Venezuela right now where you're probably very safe in Venezuela. All the criminals have came here to America, and you have a lot of this going on where they're going to New York, committing the crimes, and then maybe coming to Florida to spend the money, because they know if they do that stuff here, Governor DeSantis means business. It's not like an Alvin Bragg where you can attack the police and then you can just go about your business. They take that stuff serious. So
yeah, there was a ring in New York that was busted, very similar to what you're talking about, in that they were robbing people for cell phones and shipping and flying them down to Florida. Some probably an international ring of cell phones, and that happens a lot in New York. So you're definitely right. And those kind of crimes, typical Americans don't have an international connection to sell cell phones. So the crime didn't exist until you bring in a lot of these migrants.
Sounds good. John, we're going to land the plane here at this point. Do you have any final words or thoughts you want to get off your chest? I want to thank you for being here with us. Is there anything you'd like to say to our viewers or anything?
Oh, no, great show, JR. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
All right, great. Well, stand by 1 second. Folks, I do want to take this time and thank John Galt one last time. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate each and every one of you being here. It's always a pleasure when you take time to hear what I have to say and have a conversation with you about what's going on in our world. And it's my fondest hope that at some point we can be in a better place. It's really just that simple. Don't forget to tell your friends about our channel. We have to ward off and fight this indoctrination. Be sure to share this video. Like, subscribe. You're still with me? You might as well. Folks, I always say, keep that mind free. Never give up. And until next time, I am J.R. Dukes.